Hello and welcome back to Thirsty Thursday. This is our weekly sort of roundup of marketing news headlines that caught our eye in the business world. And we usually have a guest host here with us to chat. Today we have Wendy Brookhouse, wealth coach and founder of Blackstar Wealth. Welcome, Wendy.
Thanks for having me, Susan.
I can't wait to dig into some of these stories
I
with you. I
know
know that we're
you've got a
similarly
really
passionate.
you've got a juicy lineup today.
We really do. We really do. So let's dive sort of straight in. The first thing that we wanted to touch on, I mean, those who sort of follow along know that we have a segment that we call Podcast Wars. And in it, we look at new podcasters, new ideas, what's happening, and what we can learn from them. So this was the first one, Wendy, that caught my eye. And we
Mm.
talked about it briefly, but, a Toronto Raptor has now got a podcast. And so it's Fred VanVleet, and he has a new podcast, which is called Bet on Yourself, which is his own mantra for when he plays and when he's been rejected and so forth. And this is just a standard sort of press release on the subject. But I think what caught my eye on this was his specific sort of activist voice that is shining through in it, right? So he's talking about how he wants this to be for BIPOC entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
and that, this is him and his business partner are doing it as co-hosts, and how he'd like for people to hear some of these conversations that happen. It seems like it's easy enough for us to look at people and be like, that's so unattainable, that's so out of our reach, and
Mm.
we might not have that level of exposure. And so I think it's cool that he's doing this. What did you think?
I totally agree. I think that the more stories are out there, particularly in the BIPOC community, the more, like you just said, people can see themselves in that. I'm reminded of Bill Strickland Jr. He's out of Pittsburgh, and he set up this whole school and movement for kind of underprivileged children and all around the arts and being creative. And he said what was missing was hope. They grew up in areas
Right.
that didn't have hope, and so I think that showing that the road has been paved and that you can follow that road is so great. So kudos to Fred for that.
It really, I like that. I really like that. And what's interesting this week, folks, is typically we started this segment saying that there'll always be some news on the podcasting front. So we'll never run out of some stories. So today, I think, is the first time that we have two things that we wanted to talk about. So the second one is like, and I said this is a total oh, I can't believe this is happening because I don't have to convince anyone anymore. Oh gosh, this is it's about Stephen Colbert. So obviously his late night show has been what it is for a while, and now it's going to be a podcast. And what's interesting, Wendy, is that the podcast is not a separate property. It's the same thing. It's the show, which is converted into a podcast. Obviously, as a production studio, they're probably going to give it whatever it needs to stand alone in the sound medium. But I thought this was like, I couldn't have made the point better about repurposing. And we often talk about how, like, you should just take your videos and make them podcasts. And sometimes people look at me like, why would that work? Like, why would I want to do the same thing? Would it not lose quality? And as far as I'm concerned, maybe it does lose quality. Number one, there are people like me who honestly prefer the sound medium. Like, I think
Mm.
there's very few things that is not translatable. I'd pick a phone call over a meeting. I would pick an audio show over a video show, pretty much anything. So I think there is that, being aware that people, you'd get a new audience in that way. And
Mm.
secondly, I think it's a low involvement medium, right? Like, I could be walking, I could be cooking, whatever it is, and I could still listen to Stephen Colbert. And I think the third thing that I wanted to point out is, don't forget the smart speaker. Now you can go, hey Alexa, play Stephen Colbert, and it will.
I need a smart speaker, although I'm scared of home automation to that degree.
Yeah.
However, I concur. So I have 2 points on it. One of which, hey Susan, just like you said, it's proving your theory. His
Yeah.
show is now his anchor content, and he is repurposing it for other things. And that's where I think all of us business owners need to be thinking more about how do we take that same piece of content And then
Hmm.
my second point, go to where the customer is, go where the listener is, or the people who want to consume your content. Not everyone wants to do it one way. And so I think that accessibility piece is so very important, because I am I am a reader. So if you show me an article and it has a video, I'm not actually watching the video. I'm reading the whole article. So
Right.
right, so it's different for everybody.
100%. I think, like, this is the reason there's lots of statistics that exist. What is it? 80% of people who watch videos watch it on silent. And that's why it helps if
Mm,
you have captioning on your
yeah.
videos. And most platforms, including right now on LinkedIn as we speak, it's captioning what we're saying, right? So I think that accessibility piece is pretty key. The two takeaways from this podcasting section is, for me, it's accessibility. Number one is some of those things that we haven't thought about. And the second is education. The brands that are truly having success in that space as podcasters, or podcasting as a marketing tool, are the ones who are really treating it like education. Like, you show up, you educate, and then the demand is created for you, your brand, and your programming from that education. So I'm all over this, and I cannot wait. This is the best time to be alive in my world.
I think podcasting as a tool is just starting to come into its own.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, from there, let's go to a story that I know that been both watching. Rogers. And for those who are watching from outside of Canada, Rogers is our big telecom giant. And they've been in the news for all kinds of
All the
drama.
wrong
And
reasons.
so, do you want to catch people up a little bit on the backstory while I show it here on the screen for those who are watching?
Sure. Right now, what's going on is a massive boardroom duel between a mother and two sisters and the son, and who is
Whoa.
the brother of the two daughters. The thing that cracks me up about this story, Susan, is the fact that this whole plot came out and became knowledge because of a butt dial of a telephone. So you really do have to watch what you're doing with your phone. Lock that screen down, people. And honestly, it shows out of I see a lot about, like, there's a lot of comparisons to Succession, and I think it's a lot about ego, family dynamics, and that go back for years. It's highlighting things like, corporate structures that some people use that may not actually achieve their end goal and why they were put in place, and
Mhm.
have unintended consequences. Um, and that the only winners here are going to be the lawyers.
Yeah, I think you're right. This, for those who don't know the show, it's an HBO show. I don't know if it's as big as Billions and stuff, but
Mm.
Succession was a show that kind of, I thought it was a good show. It's a little dark and cool. And like, sometimes when you look at storylines, you think about it and you're like, how is this possible? Like, is this happening in real life? Like you said, the butt dial and the infighting and the somebody finding out they were fired because it was in the news, or all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, go on,
I was
Wendy.
going to say, if we go back to the 80s, it's a dynasty all over again, right?
There you go. Can I shame confess that I sort of watched the reboot of
Yeah,
Dynasty?
you go. New season just
Yeah,
landed. Moving on.
that's hilarious. But yes, I think what's the sort of lesson from this story? Sometimes the fiction is fiction because that shit happens in real life.
Loosely based on a true story. There's going to be a
Loosely
movie on
based.
this one. You can tell
There's
for sure.
For sure. So yeah, I think, what, like Wendy was saying earlier in the green room, whoever you are and however you tell your story or however it goes wrong, you're not Rogers this week. So so you're
Yes.
probably gonna be fine. um from there on to the very, very amazing Spanx story that has
Mm,
been in the news, Wendy. So Sara Blakely has been catching attention for all the right reasons. Firstly, obviously, was the partial exit where she sold a majority share of Spanx last week to a private equity firm, and she then rewarded all of her employees with, like, was it a $10,000
$10,000
Cap.
check and two first class tickets to wherever they wanted to go.
I love that. I love that.
I
Talk to
know.
me. What are you thinking?
Whew. There are so many things that I love about this. Number one is that she recognized that it wasn't just her that got them to where they're at. Like, she had employees that obviously did a lot of good work and a lot of good things to get her there. Number two, she busted the stereotypical that, most of these companies that make $1 billion in value, there's very few run by women, and here she is getting partial
Mm-hmm.
value for her company at 1.2 billion. And the third thing is that I watched her speech, and I talked about how she had been discouraged, and how when she wrote $20 million is what I want my company to be worth, people laughed at her. And I love that she persevered. I love that she had a vision, stayed true to it, and made it happen. And she helped an awful lot of women along the way, which was fantastic. And she also highlighted in that speech how hard it is for women founders to get funding. So my hope, Susan, is that she takes this this win and finds a way to even multiply and amplify that win even further with more female founders.
Yeah, I think she will. I think, the fact that it's a partial exit, like we were talking about in the green room, is totally indicative of the fact that she's got more planned, and she's got, you know, this path is going to take her cool places, and I cannot wait.
I know.
Now,
Wonderful.
on the other end of the scale, we wanted to talk about another woman head. Do you want to set that up while I share the
Sure. We're
screen?
talking about Elizabeth Theranos right now, who is on trial for a whole bunch of misleading things about it. And I'm not going to weigh in on whether what she did was right or wrong, or I'm sorry, if she's guilty or not guilty of what she's charged of. But what I think this shows is there's some issues going on in the startup world and in the VC funding world, in that from what I understand and what I have researched and read, is that most VCs want a unicorn. And that unicorn is defined as $1 billion exit or more. And so all the people who are looking for investments are actually encouraged to put together scenarios that may or may not ever be attainable, but show them reaching unicorn status. And I think that there's somewhere in the middle that I hope people start to play a bit more, so that founders are not forced into making these statements and these projections
Mhm.
that really aren't based in truth. Does that make sense, Susan? I think we've got some
Sorry? Yeah, of
Oh,
course it makes sense. Sorry, there's a delay here, Wendy.
no problem. So just waiting for Susan to come back so we can finish the Thirsty Thursday conversation. So grab a coffee. We'll be right back.
Ooh, fun times, folks. Here's what I discovered, Wendy.
What did you
Um,
discover, Susan?
that StreamYard will not cut you off if you're off. Like, I wasn't there, but my life kept going. So here we are. This will obviously be elegantly cut out of the podcast version, but for those who followed along live, we're gonna pick it up where we left off. Um, we were talking about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos.
Yeah, and just
And
and saying how hard it is for founders to present what's realistic in their projections because VCs want all the unicorns.
yeah, if you go down that path, you either head to becoming a unicorn or you just don't get any more money. And I can see why that sets into a stage of like desperation and where it pushes you to things that you might not normally do. It
Yeah,
also means that the speed at which things are going are so fast that there's a great deal of delegation and other people involved, and there's a price that comes with growing that fast, right? So I think that was a good little compare and contrast over there.
yeah, absolutely.
And finally, we have enough women names to compare and contrast. Not nearly as many as I hope we will, but I think
Right.
that did it for me. And then sort of staying in the women empowerment theme,
Mm.
we'll go into Canadian politics for a second, and I'm going to sort of try to share my screen over here with a little bit of fear, and I hope it doesn't freeze. But I think what we wanted to kick things off with and say was that there were a couple of things that happened. So Justin Trudeau, after the elections that were last month, where he's put together his new cabinet, and there's a lot of women names on it. And I think that's a good, empowering, sort of space to be in. I think people have called it out and said that it's potentially performative and token like and shallow, just like that's the criticism, and shallow just like everything else. But you know what, for what it's worth, I think a couple of the roles, especially the Minister of Defense, who is Anita Anand, who is a brown woman. And for someone like me, who's the mother of a 10-year-old brown girl, this, I finally have examples. I'm like, you can be anything you want to be, including the Minister of Defense, is not something that we heard, right? And so I think that's come a long way, and I'm into it.
I just think it it does feel like it's just natural. The thing naturally, what should be happening in this time
Mm-hmm.
is recognizing the talents, and they have talents, and showing them in the like. If we look at Chrystia Freeland and what she's been able to do as deputy prime minister and all the roles she's had before, I mean, she's kicking ass and taking names, man. She's doing so well, and it's lovely to see. And you don't necessarily have to have a set resume to be
Yes,
able to perform.
I agree. There were a couple of other interesting placements as well. There's Marcy Ian, who was Minister for
Yeah.
Women. I thought that was really
I
cool.
didn't
There's
even know
Melon.
she was running, so it was kind of cool to read up on her on that she had actually entered into politics.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love
Yeah.
her. And then there's Melanie Jolie. And then you wanted to shout
I
out.
just wanted to
Um,
do a shout out to Sean Fraser. He's an MP from Nova Scotia who's the new immigration minister. And I don't know if you've heard the story of Peace by Chocolate with Tariq Haddad. He's in his riding, and so it's kind of interesting to see, like, one of the most prominent, refugees or Syrians, and now they've become a success story. Is in his writing, so that's
I
wonderful.
love that. Yeah, I remember when you sent me, I think it was a few Christmases ago, some Peace by Chocolate bars, and the story was within, and I love it. I love how they've shaped that brand. On then, folks, to the world of NFTs, and I think what's in the news. I think again, just like podcasts, NFTs are in the news every week. There's always something. Somebody's going down that path, and people are understanding in a very nebulous sort of way what the value to creatives is, right? Like,
Mm.
so an NFT is a digital piece of art, and somebody owns it and they auction it, and then you've seen things like, oh, this was sold for 6 million or 8 million, and you're like, how does that happen, and what is that all about? So anyway, the idea is that creatives get to create something and then own that, and that intellectual property is
Mm-hmm.
being sort of valued in money. So it's just like, to my mind, it's like art, right? The value is in the eye of the beholder. Now, the questions that you get typically is like, oh, could this, anyone could save this or screenshot this, you know.
Yeah.
We talk about screenshots of things all the time. And yes, you could, but I think intrinsically it's the idea behind us recognizing creative value and compensating it that's in there. So I think the move this week was from Adobe,
Mm.
which is essentially the company that owns Photoshop and Illustrator and all of those tools that marketers and designers use a lot. And Photoshop now has a sort of a prepare as NFT option within the tool itself. So creatives have outputs in various ways, like you send it into to publications or digital stuff or whatever. And so now prepare as NFT is a clear way to track origins from the creator all the way to the exit. So I thought that was cool. What are your thoughts in the NFT area?
Well, I think they're still percolating. I did take a fintech course earlier this year, but we did not get into the NFTs.
Yeah.
But I think it's based on blockchain. If I could jump, I think I can't wait. I think that with blockchain, there's so many possibilities about what can happen and how it can be used. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just fascinated by where that could go. And I love the fact that Adobe is being ahead of the curve and in figuring out, listen, people need to be able to verify this, and this is how you can do it. So, I think that there's so many opportunities that blockchain and all the resulting products like NFTs and things like that are coming out of that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the world's the oyster. I kind of think of
That's
it as
right.
the new. I think blockchain's the new internet to some degree.
For sure. And then speaking of the new internet, let's stay in the sort of metaverse and go into Roblox, and how Chipotle, the fast food brand, is doing some Halloween stuff. So I think starting today, that's the 28th to Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
they've got a specific restaurant, like an actual, they're calling it Burrito, um, for Halloween, and they've got like a Chipotle in Roblox, and then you can obviously gamers can use that and they collect points and stuff, which can then be used in for offers within the restaurant. So I think this is sort of like, for me, it's notably about that integration of the online and the offline, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you stay in a platform, you do something, and then that counts when you actually have to have a meal. And I thought that was interesting, and you had some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, that I think it's interesting. First, like you said, it's the hybrid. It's a truly hybrid thing. You're gaming to get something that you go use in the real world, if you will. And I think kudos to these guys, man. Like, I mean, they're recognizing that the worlds are blending. One, two,
Mm-hmm.
they're actually making it into a really interesting story. And what's it costing them? Right? So it's not costing them that much if you think about it. Because if I go take my coupon or whatever I earn to get my burrito, I'm probably buying a whole bunch of other stuff when I'm there. Let's be
That's
honest.
true.
So it's a great, um, loss leader, if you will.
I think so. I was questioning whether, depending on the age of the users that they
Mm.
are targeting with something like this, whether it's easy enough to get them to get off their screen and do something, and whether they even have sort of like, shall we say, financial control of where it is that they eat to decide on the basis of these things. But yeah, I think, what, like, it's like you said, the innovation in this, and it's cool. It's obviously they're getting started on something, like loss leader is a good word. But it'd be interesting to see how many more brands jump on this. A few people are going to follow suit like instantly.
It was coming into my mind a little bit about, I think about 10 years ago when, and I forget the names now, but it was almost like mass couponing was going on. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to go buy this and I'm going to spend this much, but I'm going to get this much in value. Um, that was going on, what's the special this week? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah. I like that.
it seems like an evolution of that that's a little more gamified.
That's true. Most ideas are reinventions of other ideas that exist anyway. So to round out the tales of the week, Wendy,
Yes.
we're going to end with a cool thing that the Calgary Transportation Department is
Yep.
doing. I wish I could show it, but I'm afraid to jinx a good thing when we're not glitching. So, but the Calgary Transport Department has an intern, and the intern has been doing some interesting things with the messages that go up on. So as you're driving on the highways, you can imagine in a city like Calgary that commute is hard and there's a lot of traffic and people are road ragey. So in the interest of cutting down on that road rage, they're using humor quite wickedly. And I'll read you some of these lines that are in here. Texting and driving, oh sell no.
Ah,
As opposed to, oh hell no. You're not a firework, don't drive lit.
ah,
And then some naughty sort of like country songs that have been redone for like mass consumption. I thought this was super interesting. Like that is huge real estate. As you're driving, down a highway, there's this
yeah.
giant text, and everybody reads it whether you want to or not. And what a wonderful way to bring out like a little humor, right?
Well, what I thought when you said in the green room was so true, and that was about how you don't have to be a cheeky brand to
Hmm.
do something humorous and stand out and affect change.
I agree. I mean, like I've said, I'm an unashamed fangirl of Ottawa Public Health,
Hmm.
and how they've handled the COVID comms with such wonderful humor, including that Bruce tweet, which became viral. And so these are sort of amazing examples, and I hold on to them. You don't, like you said, have to be a sexy B2B B2C brand, and you don't have to be Chipotle building things in the metaverse. But you could totally make an impact like this. So that's it, folks. That's the stories of the week. And apologies for the glitching in the middle and if you stayed through. But yeah, thanks for joining, Wendy. Did you have a
That was,
favorite story this week before I let you go?
I think, the Sara Blakely story is just so, it's transformative on many levels. So it warms my heart.
I agree. I love it. I love it. And on the other end, the popcorn worthy Rogers story. That's like, who knew Succession would come true? So
You didn't get a chance to show it, but I thought that the headline around the female defense minister was also
ooh,
very, very
yes.
interesting. Around, there's still work to be done, people. Still work to be done.
Should we risk it for
You should
just
risk
one?
it because this
We
is
should risk it. I think we should risk getting cut off, and if we do, we'll say bye ahead. But
yes.
I want to show this here.
Here it comes.
Are we seeing it? No, I
Nope.
think I have to start here. 1 minute. Okay, share.
We need to get
Fun
Sarah to
times.
buy this paper, okay?
All right, here you go. This is the thing that we were talking about, folks. For those who are watching, you can see this on the screen. It is a tweet that went out from the National Post, and in it said, "In Trudeau cabinet shakeup, Harjit Sajjan was removed as defense minister, replaced by a woman." Notice that the actual news is in the last four words, relegated to "replaced by a woman." Like seriously, you named the minister who was being taken out, and you didn't bother with this. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Didn't give the replacement a name, just a gender.
Mm-hmm. So just lump the
Let's
lot
just go.
there.
Would they have ever said replaced by a man?
Mm-hmm. For sure not. Like hell no. And this was taken down, and this is it. Caution, folks, to people who are like, oh, we you can take it down and it'll be fine. Well, you can, and it probably will be fine. But look, we found it. So it's easy enough now in today's world to have everything sort of documented. And I thought that was quite sad, and a real caution to all of us as we write headlines. Who isn't writing headlines on a daily basis? Like you've got emails, you've got everything. So be careful with the way in which you're presenting things, and don't be like National Post.
Thanks so much for having me, Susan. This was awesome.
Thank you, Wendy. Bye.
Bye.